What is up, CSGs? In this video, I'm going to talk about a new article dropped by Jonathan Feigen from the Houston Chronicle discussing that the Rockets want to trade out of their pick and possibly not even draft a player this year. What are the implications for the team going forward, for the team building, for what moves they're going to make for the rest of the summer? Tap in right now. Enjoy.
Psst, I see dead people.
What's that on that beat? Go.
Aye, monster on the beat, ho, Debo, any rat nigga, he a freak throw. Man down, call like Amber Lambs, tell him breathe, bro. Then the land to the cross, he walk around like Tizo. What's up with these jabroni? Our chickens, hey, see Compton. The industry can hate me. I'm falling the mama. How many options you really got? I mean, it's too many options. I'm finna pass on this body, I'm John Stockton. Beat your ass and hide the Bible if God watching. Sometimes you gotta pop out and show. They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. They not like.
It is that nasty part of the summer after your team has not made the playoffs, sadly, that, things are just dead, right? There's really not much to talk about with the Rockets. And I was going about my business, enjoying my summer, enjoying the days where I don't have to stay up late editing videos. And I see a tweet from one of these NBA websites saying that the draft lottery is 3 days away. I'm like, what? So I guess I've been on the moon, because obviously the draft lottery now, it's 2 days away. It's on Sunday. Today's Friday. And the Rockets are going to have to make some big decisions in this lottery and going forward once we see where the ping pong balls are going to land. Currently, we are sitting at 9th with the Brooklyn pick. And I think 12th, if I'm not mistaken, let me double check that. 12th with our pick, which is undoubtedly most likely going to go to Oklahoma City, right? If you guys remember, that's the Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul trade where Daryl Morey bumped his head trying to listen to James Harden and mortgaged our future away. And so that pick is likely going to Oklahoma City, which sucks because they're currently in the playoffs, tied 1-1 with the Dallas Mavericks as they are collecting more and more. And so this is what we're in the backdrop against, right? The Oklahoma City that owns our pick, that pick is top 4 protected. There's a 7% chance that actually conveys into the lottery. It falls into the top 4. So if you look at that compared to the field, if I was a gambling man, I'm going to assume that 93% is probably what's going to happen. You look at the Brooklyn pick that's at 9th, then you start asking yourself about this draft. Like, what does this draft look like? Are there any players in this draft that are worth trying to draft and bring in with that pick, as opposed to using that pick as a form of collecting assets or improving the current roster? And so that's the decision Rafael Stone has to make. That's where he's at right now, right? And that's a big decision. That is a big decision for the Rockets, because you look at our team, you compare us to the teams that are in the playoffs, and where we are as a franchise. It's kind of unique. We're in a unique situation. We're a team that was tanking. We're trying to pivot on to becoming one of these contender teams like Oklahoma City, like Minnesota, like New York. But at the same time, we have in the article, as Jonathan pointed out, and I'm going to read this quote from Jonathan that kind of encapsulates where the Rockets currently are. After selecting 9 players, that's 9 players in the first round of the past 3 drafts, including 6 that remain key rotation players, the Rockets have moved to the stage of rebuilding that they are more interested in increasing their stockpile of future picks than in adding another young prospect to the current roster. So this is where they're at. They are trying to pivot from being a competitive team to an actual contender, right? And as each season goes along with this current team, the chances for young players to come in and play young player type games and learn and have the growth curve of a young player in real time diminish, right? You're not going to have the, okay, I'm just going to bench you, but you're still going to play every game. If you look at real contenders, young guys don't play like they don't. That's just how things go. The reason is because they have better players that need to get reps. You have vets on your team. You have other players that can do what they do, but better. So at this point, I know there is a school of thought of you can always keep adding young players. That is very true. You look at Braun on Denver, or, there's different young guys around the league that actually contribute to winning, basketball for their teams. Buddy on Dallas, I'm blanking on his name right now, the center, he's playing big minutes in the playoffs. The only problem with that philosophy, and people are missing the key point of this, is that those teams are already established with their superstars and they're veteran-laden teams. It's hard to keep adding young players to a team that is made up of predominantly young players. you can add and draft as a good team when most of your players are actually old and established. Their games have been developed out, but you're going to need to develop the guys you currently have on hand. So it kind of becomes one of those diminishing returns type deals when you keep adding players to the roster. Now, there is an exception to that for me, right? If you're adding a player that is actually maybe an older player, most of the top 10 players in the draft are 19, 20-year-olds. So a lot of them are kind of raw young players, right? They're going to have to develop them over the years. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But for me, we're at the point where we need to find specialists to actually do things that you can plug and play from day one. And that usually requires drafting players that are a little bit older, that are a little bit more specified in what they actually produce on the court. So if you're looking for a shooter, you're going to go get a shooter, right? The Rockets, and Jonathan alludes to this in the article about them swinging for upside. Most of their drafting, of the players that we've got. And some of them swung and missed, and some swung and hit. And there's still a couple guys that are pending. But as you're trying to build out a team, upside becomes a little bit too erratic for you to trust as a gauge of, this is what I should do to try to build this roster. You kind of want to go on the sure thing. And I think that's where Stone and the front office is pivoting to right now. And this, to me, signals a change in philosophy of what they expect this team to do this coming season, right? Because if they were still exploring the youth movement per se, as far as like, we're just going to just kind of keep developing our players, which they are, then they would keep drafting. But I feel like they've seen enough to say that they have some semblance of a core that they want to move forward with. And they've seen enough production from said core that they feel like they could move on to the next stage. And I'm going to describe what that looks like right now. So if the Rockets aren't going to draft a player, basically what they're planning to do is to trade back out of that pick to get future assets. That's what their preferred plan of action is going to be. Now, whether that happens or not is another thing. Like, in order for that to happen, two got to play. You know what I mean? You got to tango. It take two to tango. Another team has to want that pick that Brooklyn's at, that 9th pick, to be able to give up future assets for it. And possibly maybe you can get a player out of it. And the problem with that, this draft is so weak that I just can't see a team just dying to give up future picks in a possibly stronger draft. And, the next year's draft is supposed to be way better than this one for a pick now, unless there's a player they just love, or is somebody that's just out of there that they just need this. Now, if it's, the way I could see this needle being threaded, most likely the teams that are going to be the ones to want to trade up are going to be teams that are eliminated as we speak from the playoffs, but are actually bubble contenders, or teams that are tankers, right? A team like Utah was brought up in the article as a team that would look possibly towards doing this. He also threw in OKC, which I think is no. I don't think OKC would want to do that, unless there was something really incentivized for them to do so. I don't see why they would, let's say, for instance, give the Rockets the 12th pick and, and they get the 9th pick and they give us a future protected first or something like that. I don't see the incentive for that for them. One, they have 1 million picks. Two, they have the same problem we have. It would just help them kick the can down the road. And in the same breath, it would have them draft another player to another player to an already stacked team. Don't see that happening. The Utah thing, I don't think Utah is, I don't think they're just going to be tanking for the next half decade. When you're a team that's not in a big market, you get in a funny gray area when you try to do a rebuild that extends for too long, where you can get stuck there because you're going to tarnish your brand. You're not the Lakers, where you could be horrible for 8 years and then all of a sudden LeBron wants to go play for you. These teams that are like the Indiana Pacers of the world, you can't dibble and dabble in being a bad franchise for too long, because once you're already fighting the uphill battle of not being relevant as far as a destination, but now then having the tag of a constantly bad team, you can fall into purgatory. And so I doubt that Danny Ainge's plan is for them to stay there. So you start thinking about teams that could want to do this. You start thinking about teams like, not saying the Clippers have anything in the future to do, but maybe they do. Teams like the Clippers, you look at some of these teams that are struggling right now with their team. Maybe they're a little old. They want to add some youth, and, they're in the 20s in the draft, and they want to move into the 9th to possibly get a player that they think can help them. Then that's, to me, that's more realistic of the team that you would see this, because the teams that are garbage, they're not going to want to just move into the ninth pick because it really doesn't move anything for them. Now, there are some teams that will do so if it involves players. Now, this is where I think the Rockets are going to fall in line. If there's a team out there that has a player that could help our roster, that they could offer in a trade for moving up to the ninth pick, where the Rockets get back a player and maybe not great picks, maybe some seconds, that won't hurt the team that's given up said player. I think that's where it gets a bit interesting as far as with these trades. And, I mean, I don't know who we would send out. I guess whoever makes the salary work. But to me, that's the only scenario that I could see that would kind of improve our team now, and at the same time recoup some assets for the future. If I'm a betting man, I'm betting that's what's going to happen. Okay, y'all can mark my words here. I think the most likely outcome for the Rockets is that we actually draft the pick that we're at, because nobody's going to want to actually dance with us. If we do dance, I think it's going to involve players. I don't see a pick for pick, straight up pick. I think it's going to be a thing where we try to get a player, a role player, to come in, and a team offload said player. They get to move up in the draft, maybe draft a younger player that's could help them down the line in the same position or possibly just the area of need, or a player that they actually like, and we get some, some future seconds or something like that. That, you guys always make fun of me for valuing second round picks, but guess what? Buddy Hield costs 3 seconds. So maybe those future seconds from 2026 is when we're making our championship run. That trade mid-season for our Buddy Hield or for our whatever Iguodala is what gets us over the hump. So I call that smart GMing on Stone's part. Now, I've been harsh on Rafael Stone for most of his tenure. I'm giving this dude this summer, bro. Like, I'm really stepping back and allowing him to do what he needs to do, because one, he has a competent coach. So there's no excuse there on that front. And, with said competent coach, you have a different voice in the room that can lend some opinions about players and basketball things that he may not have benefited from in the past. So I'm going to see what he does with that. I'm going to see what he does with that. But the implications for me for all of this for the Rockets is, you just look at the playoffs right now, right? You look at the teams that are having success. OKC, internal developed team that built from the ground up. You look at a team like Minnesota, internal developed team built from the ground up. They added a key piece with Rudy Gobert, but the main catalyst for that team is homegrown. You look at Boston, the same thing. Indiana is a mixture of homegrown guys, made some key trades to kind of get some guys in there like Halliburton, Pascal Siakam. You look at New York, making the trade for Jalen Brunson to add to some of their core players. They've added some key role players over time. But one thing that is common across all of these teams is that the age of trying to aggregate superstars together and compile them like Thanos collecting rings is gone, right? You can't do that anymore in the NBA. Why? Because one, it kills depth. You don't have the depth to compete. All these teams that we're talking about, they are all super deep. These are deep teams. They can go damn near 8 to 10 deep, and they play a good brand of basketball, right? They play team basketball and they defend. So as you're the Rockets, you're looking at your roster. You have a core six. You have some great vets on the roster. You already have, about a good 7 or 8 players, possibly 7. Let's say, I'll say 8 to be nice, that you can clearly say you can rely on. I think when you're looking at some of these moves that Rafael Stone is talking about in this article, is you want to look at how can you improve the team on the peripherals. And I've said this all year. We need to add players that can impact winning right now. As these seasons come along, chances for young players to get those reps, to be young guys on the court, and to be, a rookie, those go away, because now you're trying to win games. You're trying to get into the playoffs. Every game matters. The reps matter. Everything matters. And as your players get better, the chances for those young guys are less and less and less. You're not going to let a guy figure it out on the court anymore, because one, there's just probably a better player at this position. So it's time for the Rockets to start bringing in players that could actually assist them in winning. And I think that the first step to doing so is going to be with this draft. And I think that they're making the right decision by trying to trade back out of that pick. I think we end up drafting the pick just because I don't see any market for that right now. But if they did make a move to trade back, I feel like it would involve a player. I feel like it would involve a player because, as I said earlier, it would involve us having to assist, either offloading a contract for somebody to give us that, and for us to also be able to receive those future picks We'd have to make it worth it for said team, and they would have to make it worth it for us. And if we could strike a perfect balance of actually bringing in a player that could help us right now, then we'd be doing something. We'd be doing something. So that's what I feel about that. As it relates to the current playoffs and just some of the implications, some of the things I'm seeing. One thing, obviously, I've talked about this in the last video I made, which felt like a month ago, but defense is still very important, right? Defense is important, and this lends to what I've kind of preached all year about one of the most impressive feats that Coach Udoka has done this year is his ability to turn a Steven Silas bottom of the league defense into a top 10 defense. And it was top 6 or 7 until Şengün got hurt. As I've been combing through the numbers all year, yeah, Alpi made a huge difference on the defense. And the exit interview with Coach Udoka, he's quoted as saying that Şengün took a defensive leap from day one, right? So that is going to be incredibly crucial for him to be able to have that defensive leap and keep leaping, because in the playoffs, as you guys are seeing, any weakness that you have is going to be aggressively hunted by your opponent. That is what's going to happen. If there's a weak defender out there, they're going to be hunted over and over. If there's a mismatch to be had, it's going to be hunted over and over mercilessly until you quit. And that is what the playoffs are. It's a chess match. It's a chess match of just one-on-one, coach on coach, player on player, mano y mano. Can you get it done? That's what it's going to come down to. That's what it's going to come down to for the Rockets. And what you want to do is build a roster that has as little holes as possible when you're going into the playoffs. Depth is important. You see Denver struggling right now with that lack of depth, right? You see the players taking these leaps in the playoff. Jalen Brunson has been balling out. Anthony Edwards is looking like a dog. I'm not going to hold y'all. That Jalen Green, Anthony Edwards talk is kind of, there's a big gap developing there as we speak right now. He's ascending into another level. And for me, for Jalen to even touch that, he got to get a lot bigger. And his bag got to get a lot deeper. I mean, Ann is just a different animal right now. But to me, the most important thing for the young Rockets, as they are watching, and I know they're watching these games, there's two things they need to consider. The physicality of the playoffs. So that means you got to get in the gym, bro. You got to get in the gym. You got to get your weight up. You got to get your strength up. And you just got to be a bigger, stronger player than you are. And this goes across the board for all our players. And number two is endurance. It is a grueling thing to go through multiple rounds of the playoffs, especially late in these games. It becomes just a scrap fest. Guys are hitting each other. There's a lot of bumping. And if you're not don't have the endurance enough to be able to play in these types of environments on the road, fourth quarter, game 4, game 5, series on the line, big key games, they're hunting you on defense, or you gotta carry the team offensively. If you're not conditioned enough to do that, then you're going to struggle. You're going to look bad. So that's one thing that they all need to work on is conditioning. And I think some of the guys need to just get bigger. Like you look at Cam and the men, I think they're good for their size and their age. Jalen needs to get bigger. I think Şengün needs to get a lot stronger. I think when I think about endurance issues, I'm thinking about Şengün more than anybody on the team. When I'm thinking about size issues, I'm thinking about Jalen more than anybody on the team. But I think it applies to everybody. But that's going to be a big piece of what they can do. I also think that, the shot making on 1v1 got to be a lot better. And for me, that's Jalen's biggest problem right now is his inability to be able to create in the half court set. He struggles in the half court, and transition is a demon. One of the best transition players, young players in the league, causes havoc with his speed. But in the half court set, when teams are loaded on you, you got to be able to score. That's what the playoffs come down to. You look at a Jamal Murray, who's been playing like trash. One thing that brother can do, 1v1, he can get a bucket. And that's where the analytics and the stats get skewed when you watch playoff games. A lot of people, and this goes back to like the James Harden arguments, right? Where guys will be like, well, statistically, if you look at the stats, James was efficient in a lot of playoff games. And I'm talking about his time in Houston. Now, in the bubble, he was good, right? I'll give him that. But a lot of the reasons to me James struggled in the playoffs because late in games when everything was out the window, you couldn't run your the pick and rolls with Capella. The ISOs, they were heavily loading up on you and forcing you to hit your teammates to make those shots. He couldn't get separation enough to get a bucket, right? This was a lot of his playoff melts comes out of those frustrations. The reason I'm bringing that up is because to me that's where the extra athleticism comes into play. And I think that's why I like JG, to be able to get bigger and stronger, to be able to use that athleticism. You see Jamal Murray struggling against a big defense because he doesn't have that extra gear of athleticism to go to. Skill can get you so far, but I think the higher up you get in the playoffs, you have to be an above average athlete if you're not somebody that has just immense skill, or you're just strong or big for your size. So if you're just an average player that has a limited bag, like James Harden does in the playoffs, and the reason and he has a deep bag on the handles and blah blah blah, but you got to have a 3-level game, bro. You got to get in the post. You got to have a post-up bag. You know what I mean? Watch Brunson. Watch Ant. You got to have a post-up bag. You got to have a mid-range bag. James added that later in his career. I'm saying all this. I'm talking to Jalen Green. You feel me? You got to have the footwork bag. SGA. You got to see what SGA doing with the footwork game. You got to be able to finish on the inside by different angles. You got to be able to shoot from the outside. You got to be a complete player, right? And if you can only get to the free throw line or shoot threes, then you're not a complete player. And so for Jalen, he got to get stronger. He got to get bigger, and his bag got to get a lot deeper. But the thing that he's blessed with is that God-given athleticism. That's what's going to separate him. If he can hit all the notes he needs to get to that next level, then everything else just falls into place. Alp, same thing. Got to get that shot, brother. Alp can cook in isolation. I know he can get to a spot. He's strong enough. He's a bully, one of the best downhill players in the league. But they're going to spam him not shooting like crazy. And when you're being forced to drive into a crowd, guys are swiping at you and everything is going to get frustrating. You're going to get them turnovers turned up, right? So he got to get into that, get that shot up. So you got to look for that. His endurance got to get up. Got to be able to play through the fourth. Got to be able to move them puppies in the fourth quarter when Kyrie Irving is hunting you. Now, he's not a super elite, like in-space defender, but he's good enough. And that's all you really got to be in the playoffs. It's good enough that you're not going to hurt your team, and excellent on what you actually do best for him, which is going to be on offense. And I think all of that lends to endurance. Amen Thompson, I said this before. The playoffs are not kind to players that can't shoot, right? Unless, and I don't mean can't shoot like, you're Steph Curry. You got to be Steph Curry. If you are a 15% 3-point shooter, you're not going to be on the court, bro. Like, I don't care how impactful he is. You have to be able to be at least like a 30% 3-point shooter. He got to be what Şengün was last year as a shooter, bro. Just hit 1 out of every like 6 or 7 threes, and you'll be okay with everything else you bring. But I don't give a damn how impactful you are. These teams are so elite on defense. They're going to scheme you out of the game. So he needs to get to at least being a bad shooter. What he was a negligible shooter. He wasn't even a shooter. You know what I mean? From 3. I'm talking about from 3. But he got to have at least like a 30%. 30%. You got to give me that, bro. Cam Whitmore, I think, is a guy that he has all the physical tools to be an excellent playoff player. To me, the mentals, if you guys watch Mind the Game pod with LeBron and JJ Redick, LeBron emphasized this a lot. Guys that are like not thinkers of the game, you can't just be a bucket in the playoffs, bro. We don't need more D-Los on in the NBA. If you can't think the game from a cerebral level, you're going to get phased out. So, Cam, we're going to need that, bro. I need you to study the playbook, learn about the game of basketball, watch film, know tendencies, understand what teams are trying to force you to do. You can't just throw up shots, bro. That stuff is not going to work in the playoffs, right? That stuff is not going to work. Jabari, he got to get a consistent offensive game and be able to guard in isolation on defense and be able to be a good team defender, right? You can't fall asleep backside. Got to help when you got to help. Got to make good rotations, or every little mistake you make is going to be magnified times 1,000,000 because teams are going to pick it apart. Ask the Lakers. Every time you make a mistake, the good teams are going to pick you apart. I'm pointing out all these things to let you all know that when you judge our team and where we have to go compared to where the real good teams are, we still have some ways to go, right? Tari Eason, right? No 1v5. Y'all heard Drake and Kendrick say this ain't 1v20, it's 20v1. Yeah, Tari Eason 1v5, 5v1 when you running fast breaks, bro. Pass the ball, bro. We can't have those crash dummy missions. Happy birthday to you, by the way, little brother. But you can't go out there trying to make layups on the entire team and the coaching staff and the bench, bro. Learn to pass the ball. No more tunnel vision. And I'm saying that because little things like that could swing games, right? Hone in on your skills. And I was give this to Tari. He was playing really, really well in his position until he got hurt. So I definitely know he could do that. But obviously him as a defender, I think he's going to be a playoff thriver. I think his game is built for the playoffs. I think, I think everything that he can do is something that's going to help the team. But for all our young guys, they gotta really address their weaknesses, because one thing, I am one that looks at the optimistic view of what guys can be, but the playoffs really bring out the negatives in players. Whatever your worst trait is, it's gonna highlight it. So if I'm these guys, this is why I wanted them to play so bad in these playoffs, because I wanted these things to be brought out so they know exactly what they need to do. Sometimes it's better to show somebody better than you can tell them. You can say, hey, Shangun, work on your conditioning. He might or might not. But if he's getting tired every fourth quarter after having to move his feet, and he gets embarrassed in the playoffs and the team loses because of that, trust me, he's going to go to the summer a little different. If Jalen is getting bumped and bruised and loses confidence and scared to go to the basket because he can't make a layup, he might want to lift a little harder in the summer. If Cam gets pulled from the game because he's just jacking up shots, same thing. They're treating you like Russ. Your defender is literally under the basket boxing out a guy while you're on the three-point line with the ball. Guess what you're going to do? Work on your shot a little bit more. Now, some guys don't need that. They can do it regardless. But like I said, sometimes it's better to show somebody better than you can tell them. So these are things that we should all consider as this summer comes along. And we'll be talking about the post lottery, see where we fall, and some of the implications for all that as we lead up to the draft, free agency, et cetera, et cetera. To me, I'm looking at this from what do our guys need to do to get to where they need to go, to get this team to where it needs to go, which is what we're watching right now from the other teams. How do we get to be OKC in Minnesota? How do we get there? And it's going to take everybody addressing their weaknesses, right? Once we switch over to actually saying that we're going to try to be a contender, the commentary is going to change a little differently, because you have to start talking less about potential and more about reality. And especially for Jalen's and Shangun's class, potential is kind of dying right now, right? Year 4, potential is dying. Potential is dying, right? We are going to be judging on reality, and that's how it should be, because potential is potential until reality happens. And once reality happens, then you judge those players on what reality is. And in the NBA, reality is when money got to get paid. And you already know about the summer extensions. I doubt that either Shangun or Jalen get extended this year, which is perfectly fine. But money got to get paid and guys got to deliver. So it's going to be an interesting summer per usual, but just wanted to tap in with you guys. Appreciate you guys for, supporting the channel. If you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Keep rocking with the Chop Shop, and we're going to keep dropping that fire.
DJ Candlestick.